Hi everyone. I see that there are so many of you calling in from different time zones, and I want to thank you all for coming. Before we actually start, I'd like to introduce myself. So, my name is Milana, and I was the lead of the symposium. It's a project initiated by the IUX community to practice public speaking and presentation skills. Additionally, I assist with organizing various events within the IO. And today I'll be hosting this meeting focused on the admissions process to the US. So a little bit about myself. I'm currently a student at a competitive liberal arts college in the US with a full scholarship. And as a high student, I actively participated in academic and research competitions. And in retrospect, I believe participating in Olympiads strengthened my academic foundations, prepared me for exams, and also provided me with a network of outstanding students, researchers, and professors, which eventually contributed to building my portfolio. I think Olympiads also helped me to prepare for the rigorous international academic environment. So for today's meeting, we invited a special guest and partner of the IO, Yelena Kadeykina. She's the founder of Hermiona Education and will tell us about the admissions process to the United States. Speaking of Yelena's background, she's an MIT graduate, an expert who specializes on American education. Among her many professional experiences, she served as a consultant at MIT and the World Bank, as well as she was involved in technological entrepreneurship. We're very glad to have you here with us today, Yelena. Thank you very much for this amazing opportunity.
Thank you so much for having me today, Milana. It's very nice to see you again.
Yeah.
So let's get started. Let's discuss what we're going to be talking about.
Sure. So today, Yelena and I will, during this meeting, Yelena and I will provide you with an overview of American education in a more conversational format and discuss the key components of US university application process. So following the discussion, there will also be a separate Q&A session for our participants, which we hope that you all find useful.
Okay, so let's speak about why why United States, not everywhere else. How about this? Let's get started with that.
Sure. So my first question would be, what makes American education so appealing yet competitive?
Well, I think there is a number of things that make it extremely appealing and that's why competitive. Let's focus on 5 for today's conversation, out of which I would like to actually point out 2 which I think make it outstanding. One is an academic flexibility, about which I think we'll talk a little bit more later. Another one is network. For example, when I was studying at MIT, out of the class of 323 people, more than 40% were international students. At the end of the day, after years, when I graduated from MIT, now I have a network around the globe, and basically no matter what kind of project I want to initiate, using that network is very helpful to me. So another thing which I think is we should also look at American education is ability to develop soft skills, no matter what kind of profession you pick. For example, if you're studying at MIT computer engineering, you will still be required to talk about public speaking. One of my students, he was the gold winner in Olympiad on computer science. And when I asked him, what is your favorite class at MIT? He said, public speaking, because finally I know how to speak in public. So this is a very rare combination where you don't find anywhere in the world. Of course, while you're studying at the university, you already will be developing your resume, which is also quite unrare anywhere in the rest of the world, and campus experience, where campus, basically each university's own kingdom, has a lot of opportunities for clubs, sports, anything you can think of. I know that you also looked at different options, Milana, right, around the globe, and somehow you picked USA. So why did you decide to pick USA for yourself?
Thank you so much for your question. I think there are several reasons. So probably the first one, the affordability. Um, I think that the US has colleges, especially liberal colleges, which are quite generous towards international students. And I had the opportunity to win a full scholarship, which basically allowed me to relocate my studies to the US. I think this is something that many other countries across the globe don't have. They either offer partial scholarships or don't offer any at all. And for some students who don't really have the resources to go abroad, it might be very challenging. The second reason, which we'll discuss in depth a bit later, is the holistic approach. I think that the US admissions really um, focus on the student, on an applicant as a person. So they look at your essays, they look at your resume, they look at your projects. They really pay attention to interviews. So they really want to get you know as a person and see your potential. Whereas I think that in a lot of European countries, let's say the UK, they really focus on exam results. Which, in my opinion, is cannot be the sole indicator of your success. So this is another thing that I really like about American education. And I think having a background in Olympiads and being able to create projects related to Olympiads with my fellow friends that I met there, I think it was also a thing that allowed me to win a full scholarship at a US college. I think if I were applying to other countries, I think they would take my exam results more seriously. Whereas in the US, they also, look at your projects as mentioned before.
I think you're bringing up a very good two basically points in addition to already five listed on the slide. One is that's true. Basically, nowhere in the world except for United States there is so much recognition for the talent in terms of providing full ride at the universities. And don't get us wrong, it doesn't mean that anyone can come into the United States and study here for free. That's not the point we're trying to drive across. What we're saying, if you're a very strong candidate, you will have an opportunity to study in the United States either at a partial scholarship or as Milena will be studying on a full ride. Another thing which I don't think is so relevant for majority of you because you're very academically strong, but still something to consider, as Milena pointed out, holistic approach. So for the students who are either not that academically strong or extremely academically strong, but are not quite clear what path they want to pursue, United States gives this option. For example, when we talk about academic flexibility, you can pursue two different major, or you can pursue, for example, I was originally studying economics and art history. Nowhere else in the world you would be able to study those two subjects simultaneously towards your bachelor degree. You can study politics and physics. I mean, there are a lot of different options, basically, that you can mix. You can also apply to United States as undecided major, which is very popular at liberal arts colleges, one of which you're going to. And I think what we want to also talk about is actually, and I think would be, I hope here you can talk with Milani a little bit
Yeah,
about liberal arts approach. When people think about the United States, they think about big brands, right? They think about Harvard, Princeton, UPenn, Stanford, a very limited number of colleges. But US educational landscape is amazing. Only in Boston, where I live, and I live in, to be exact, I live in Cambridge, in US Cambridge, right? We have over 2,000 higher education institutes, out of which 5 are actually in the top 100 in the world. So the opportunities basically here, anything you can think of. Milanda, I think here, speaking of American educational landscape, maybe you can tell the audience a little bit what is liberal arts education about.
sure. I think that I would define liberal arts educational system as a system where they want to train well-rounded people that would be able to pursue several career paths. And what I mean here is that, as Yelena mentioned, in the US, you can be a physics major, and let's say you're interested in learning more about politics. So you can choose a double major in physics and politics. You can pursue them at the same time, which is, and you can also change those majors at any time before, I think, the second or third year of your education, which is also really good because I think when you're young, so the age of at the age of 17, 18, it's really hard to decide on the subject, on the field that you were specialized in, right? And then when you come to college, you initially think, oh, I want to study economics. But then when you're at college, you realize this is not something you're that passionate about, and you still have the opportunity to discover other fields that you might like. So I think it's the flexibility of liberal arts that makes it so attractive, as well as in many liberal arts colleges, there are a lot of courses that students must take that encompass world languages, public speaking, writing. And I think this is the kind of educational system that grows future leaders that are really well-rounded in different fields, that allows you to explore yourself.
Yeah, and when we speak about liberal arts colleges, it doesn't mean you will not be able to study physics there, or you will not be able to study politics there. For example, Amherst College, which is number one in the country currently as a liberal arts college, and as competitive as Harvard, its acceptance rate at 4% at the moment, offers one of the best computer science in the country courses. So don't think if liberal arts by itself means that you're going to be only studying what you might think of humanities, right? Or economics. Not necessarily at all. Or for example, if you go to Institute of Technology, it would mean you will never take public speaking. As I already pointed out in the previous example, even if you'd study at places like MIT, you will be required to take writing courses, public speaking courses. You will be required to take language courses. Basically, what American university will help you to become is a well-functioning individual that no matter how society will be changing, you will still you will be able to find yourself there. I think another thing I want to point out is that basically each university in the United States is kind of like its own kingdom, its own country. What I mean by this, the rules can really vary. So when you're applying, let's say, to Princeton, right? And you look at the requirements, don't assume that the same requirements will be at MIT. Don't assume same requirements will be at Connecticut College. You will always check what is happening at each specific school. Some school, for example, we will talk about what goes into application in a second, but some schools might require tests, some might say it's optional, some might require just a couple of recommendations, it's very, very specific, and it's very important not to assume that one school will go by the same rule. Every school will go by the same rules. So
Yes, thank you very much for telling us more about the educational system in the US. I think everyone here can agree that American education is indeed very competitive and appealing, but I suggest discussing what the application process actually consists of, like the main components.
okay, sounds great. So when we think about application process, admission process to the United States, let's first think about academics. What do I mean by academics? They will look at your grades, and important thing that at most competitive universities, they will look at your grades for the last 3 years. So they would see what type of coursework you took, how challenging was the subject, were you progressing, or vice versa in your grades. They will look at tests. I think tests, that's something I would want to discuss in a little bit of depth, because when the COVID started, majority of universities said the tests are not required because was basically during the COVID year, not even possible to take them. One, it was our test came back optional, with an exception of two schools, MIT, Harvard. Now we can see more and more universities saying we are going back to the test. Why is that? Well, tests are definitely not indicative of your success or your intellectual brilliance. They help universities to establish how well you do in American academic system. And what our professors are finding out right now, and students, that those, because they have removed tests, that it became much more challenging for a number of students to study. So when you see test optional at the university website, don't assume test optional is actually test optional. And by the way, when Americans say optional, it means it's when it's a competitive place, it's usually highly recommended to do that exactly. Milana, I think you have some experience with test optional that you would like to share, or am I wrong?
Well, I could share.
Okay, let me rephrase it. Do you have any insights? What is your position on test optional?
Uh, in my opinion, I totally agree. The thing is that, so if you're an international student applying to the US, the admissions committee might highly admire you for your extracurricular activities, Olympiad participation. But again, don't forget that you're an international student studying, following a system of education in another country. So the US admissions committee might not really be acquainted with the particular educational system in your country. So for them, taking SAT or ACT or any AP exams will show how competitive you'll be in American educational system, since that's the US is the place you're applying to. So in my opinion, if you have the opportunity to take the SAT and you have high scores, then I would highly recommend to send them in, because although it's not a decisive factor, and just because you have a high SAT score, a full scholarship will not be guaranteed, but at least you'll be able to enter the race having high SAT scores. And then, I don't know, also at any research papers that have written, any extracurricular activities that you've taken part in. So, however, if you don't really have high SAT scores, or maybe those it's not available in your city or in your country, then I think you might try to compensate for the lack of SAT by Olympiads, different academic competitions, or maybe collaborating with professors on research papers. However, as mentioned before, if you have the opportunity, do take it, because if it says test optional, it's not really test optional for international students.
Right. And if you don't have an opportunity to take, maybe for financial reasons or for some other reasons, there are there are sections in your application where you can comment on additional things you want to mention about yourself, and that's your opportunity to explain why you decided not to pursue SAT, especially if you come to finance. And personal essays is actually something where you can compensate for lack of the scores by talking about your passion, interest, what do you do in life outside of school. Recommendation letters. So this is something I also recommend to take extremely seriously, in the sense that recommendation letters in the United States are very different in its content from the rest of the world. They're different not in the sense those are not recommendations, they're still recommendations, but they are usually very much in depth and very detailed. What I mean by this, if your recommender makes a statement, for example, Milana is extremely proactive. That could not be just one sentence that goes into recommendation letter, right? There should be specific examples where your recommender demonstrates that the statement is actually relevant. Recommendation letters, depending on the school, have different weight, but it's always a very important factor, because it's kind of a third view impression on you. So don't undermine them. And when we were discussing what to cover in this presentation, me and Milana actually went in depth about recommendation letters, and she had some very good insights from her own experience, how she approached that, which I would love her to share with us right now.
Sure. So first of all, I need to say that recommendation letters are very important parts of your application, and I think they serve as kind of validation of your achievements, accomplishments, and your participation in different extracurricular activities. So a recommendation letter is not just a brag sheet of what you've done, but it's also validating your activities, because the admissions officers and the committee don't really have time to Google you up and see if you actually participated in that Olympiad or if you did that certain activity, right? But a recommendation letter could be a really good demonstration of the accomplishments that you actually achieved. And also, it's, as Yelena mentioned, it's also a very good third view on your activities at school, your academic record. I think it's also it's understandable that in many countries, teachers usually don't write recommendation letters for their students. They either don't know how to do it or they just don't want to do it. But it's important to establish some deep bonds with some of the teachers. Let's say you like math and you're good at it, then you should probably approach your math teacher and ask them to write you a recommendation letter. And it's also important to do that in advance, because writing a good recommendation letter that reflects all of your accomplishments and you as a person, your potential, is also a very time-consuming thing. In addition, I would recommend not just approaching your teacher beforehand and establishing a good connection with them, but also reminding them of some of your accomplishments, because again, your teachers are not your biographers. They don't know about every single aspect of your life. So just reminding them about some of your activities would also be a good thing. Yeah, so when I was applying to the US, I also approached some of my professors beforehand. I reached out to them, and although they didn't usually write recommendation letters, I explained what the format is supposed to be, and I also asked them to start beforehand. So I think that although the recommendation letters don't depend on you particularly, since it's not you writing them, I think it's a very important component and you should approach it seriously, not rely on your teacher knowing how to write those recommendation letters and doing all for you, if it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it absolutely makes sense. So basically, to sum up, when take your time to prepare for recommendation letters, warn your recommender 2-3 months in advance before you need those letters, at least, and always ask them, how can I help you? Is there anything I can do to help you to write this letter, to make it easier for you? Because majority of the people you will be asking for those letters most probably are extremely, not only are not your biographers, but also very busy people, right? So in addition to recommendation letters, there will be a section about your activities and where you can talk about almost anything. By anything, I don't mean I like to walk my dog, but you can talk about the activities that you like to pursue outside of your school. Majority of the places will actually ask you to fill out how much time you spent on those activities, because for them, that's an indicator of how serious you are. Also, final component, and it's not required at majority of the places, and it becomes less and less common, but you should be prepared for it. It's an interview. At the school, majority of the places right now running interviews with alums, not with an admission committee itself. So academic work in terms of test and coursework. One component, personal essay, personal statement, and also university-specific essays. Another component, recommendation letters, activities, and interview. All of those take seriously in terms of when to start preparing. We'll speak separately. So going forward, I'm trying to...
Now that you have told us about the main components of the application process, Do you think there are any secret ingredients to hack the application process?
Yeah, this is my one of my favorite quote questions when I meet new families or new students is, so what's the list? What's the list of things I need to? What's the checklist of the things I need to do to get into, let's say, MIT? And the thing is, there is no such list. But there are things which you can do more effectively that would help you to increase your chances significantly. One thing, and in my opinion, one of the most important things, and also one of the most common mistakes majority of people are making, is about fit. I don't know if any of you heard this term, fit, finding your fit when you're applying, but it's very important to understand why you are applying for a specific university. And of course, if I ask you right now, most probably if I ask you right now why you're applying to specific places, the most common answer would be brand, right? It's a well-recognized brand, it's a network, it's prestige. Of course, by itself, great. No one says prestige or brand is not important, but finding a university where you will be successful, where you can flourish, where you find a community which will share your values is extremely important. For example, if different American universities have different cultures, there are some commonalities, but still. And the culture, I mean, what kind of values are cherished at the university? It could be leadership, it could be innovation, it could be teamwork, it could be competition, it could be building community, but it's important to understand what are those values. For example, in Cambridge, where I live between two universities, Harvard and MIT. Those are as different as it gets in terms of starting from how students dress to how students present themselves. And it doesn't mean that one is better than another, but it's important to know those cultures. Harvard is very focused on leadership, right? And MIT is a very different, much more down to earth culture, and it's striking. You will be really surprised. Like one of the really good examples I have is when the class is over at Harvard, you have a special person coming up and cleaning up a board from the chalk. At MIT, it's a professor who actually cleans up a chalk. And it's not about lack of resources, but I think it's an attitude and it's a culture. And as I said, not one is better than another. It's just very different. When I also talk about fit, it's very important to look at what kind of courses and flexibility of major university offers. Sometimes one place can, if you go to a specific college within a university, you cannot switch and take an extra, for example, major, or major will be very limited with a specific college. So flexibility of academic flexibility within specific organizations should be studied separately. Speak and make sure that it actually fits your requirements. Also, some of the university would offer help to international students by financial aid. I mean, others would not. So this is also something very, very important to watch out. So basically the advice is just don't go for the brand, study each university, look like if you don't know the names, Google for the programs or maybe majors you're interested. And if you find that the university that is no name to you, study it in depth. Maybe it actually offers more options for you specifically than a university you always heard about. Speaking about personal statement and essays, I think it's a very wild animal on which you can spend a separate session. But let me try to give you short and quick advice on what to think in advance. First of all, personal statement and university-specific essay, it's not something that you can do fast. By fast, I mean even 2-3 months work sometimes are not enough for you to write those personal statement essays. By 2-3 month work, I don't mean that you're going to be sit down in front of your computer and typing personal statement nonstop for 2 months. It's more like a reflection work. Personal statement, it's your reflection on yourself. When I was writing mine for MIT, it actually took me around 6 months to finish one. And when I first wrote my first draft, when I showed it to my friend, asking what he thinks, he said he thinks it looks like a laundry list. And the essay, MIT essay, was about success. The question was, how do you define success? He called it a laundry list. So some of the essays is really hard, like sometimes even philosophical work. You can be asked about an ethical dilemma you have encountered. You can be asked about person who inspired you. There are no wrong or right answers. This is about you. This is an opportunity to be yourself. This is actually quite unique opportunity to think about yourself. So the work is hard, but it's actually at the end of the day is very rewarding. So personal statements, take them seriously. Interpersonal statements goes of your work for years, and it could be your academic work, it could be your interest outside of schools. It's basically what makes you you, and you are not built in a few months, you build throughout the years. So this is something to really take seriously. Milana, do you have any advices on a personal statement? Because looking by you, I think you do have a lot of advices.
So first of all, the general advice I would give, which really helped me to write mine, imagine that an admissions officer is walking. Imagine that a person is walking on the road and sees someone's essay, like a paper. They pick it up and then they start reading. So a good personal statement, and most of the times, is the one that you read and oh, I know it's Yelena's personal statement. So the amount of details and conciseness that involves it is something that would only describe Yelena. And out of thousands and hundreds of people that will also be applying, you understand. So this is the student's essay, right? I think that a common mistake that everyone makes when writing the personal statement is generalizing. Oh, I'm committed to driving positive change. Oh, I'm committed to driving inclusivity. Explain using your background, why is inclusivity very important for you? Why are you committed to creating inclusive spaces both in your local community, and this is something that you would also like to do while your time at college, right? So maybe using your background, explaining your ancestry, let's say, for some people, right? Maybe there are cases when one friend of mine, she actually didn't know her native language, and she spoke a foreign language her entire, well, it was also her native language, but she was bilingual, and the other language, she didn't really know it, and she had an internship in her home country, and she wrote a personal statement about how she was listening to people using those academic terms in her language, and how she felt really bad for actually not understanding that. And she explained about the whole neocolonialism situation in her country. So this was a very interesting example. Again, I cannot provide more details for privacy reasons, but that's just another example, right? So you should write something really detailed, provide as many details as you can, so the admissions officer doesn't confuse you with any other person that will be applying. So as many details as you can. And when you make statements, I'm committed to driving positive change, explain using your background, your history, whatever, your friends or your environment, why you're committed to driving positive change. So that's just an example. Another common mistake that I see people in their personal statements, I probably think that not structurizing enough. So I understand that personal statement is in sorts a very creative writing, a very personalized one. But again, you should be concise when writing. Again, provide as many details. Don't contradict to
You're
your own.
giving a very controversial advice.
Well, personal statement for each person. It's really hard to give a general advice that would suit everyone. Again, everyone has different situations. That's just a general advice I wanted to give, which I found really, really important when writing my own personal statement. You can agree or disagree, but
No, no, I was partially kidding, but you're right. You're right in the sense it's a controversial, but it's true. It has to be very specific, so you would be recognizable. Yet it has to be concise, and whether you want or not it to be concise, it will be concise because you will be given a word limit on how many words you can use to share your experience. So it will be enforced on you, but enforced still will require that you would be very, very detailed. And ideally, yes, you should be like, once someone reads this essay, they should understand it's you and pick you from the crowd. Another common mistake, and that I encounter very often with my students, is timeline and time management of when the process, when you start admission process. I don't know when you started yours, Milana, but we strongly recommend basically to preparing at least 6 to 9 months before before the application deadlines, and the earliest application deadline is at the end of October for majority of the universities, plus then California comes in November, at the end of November. But in general, if you're thinking about United States and you're on this call right now, hopefully you'd have 2 years or even 3 years before you apply, ideally. For those 2, 3 years, you can build your extracurricular profile, which we talk a little bit about which we'll talk a little bit as well. You can think how to spend your summer effectively, and those 6 to 9 months, it's basically when you kind of at the finish line, taking final tests, starting to work on your essays. So take time to prepare for US university admissions. How much in advance have you started preparing, Milana?
I think a couple of months before my application.
I should not have been asking this question. Okay, well, you have done, I mean, you have done very successfully, but maybe you're a sprinter, right? I think couple months in advance is definitely not indicative of majority
Yes.
of the people, even in the United States. Why I say even in the United States, I mean, in the United States, people understand the culture of universities. They understand the requirements from the very early age. Some crazy people I know actually start preparing from the age of 5 to 6. I'm not making it up. Not people themselves, but their parents. I think this is a little bit insane, but at the age of 14 plus, you can start seriously thinking about your extracurricular profile and activities. Yeah. What did
Speaking
you
of
want to say?
curricular profile, how should we balance, in your opinion, how should students balance their extracurricular activities with academic responsibilities? Because you should also show the admissions officers that, the commitment in your extracurricular profile. So how should students balance all of that?
Mhm. If I knew the exact answer, I would, yes, it's a very good question. To be serious, it's a very good question. One way to balance is not to pursue extracurricular for the sake of just pursuing something. For example, I know some students who would be having sometimes 5, 6 additional subjects just to impress admission committee. They will not be impressed by a wide range of spectrum. I mean, they will be extremely impressed by a wide range of spectrum if you're able to pursue it in depth. But I don't think a human being would be able to pursue in depth 5, 6 extracurricular activities. By in depth, I think anything less than 40 hours, I'm simplifying it, extremely simplifying it, would not be taken as a serious commitment. I don't know if I'm answering your question really well, but try to pick 1, 2, maybe 3 activities you're really passionate about, maybe when built in depth on one or two, it can be anything. It could be dancing, could be art, it could be research, it could be volunteering. There is no activities that will make you stand out more than others. Your attitude towards activities, how you manage those activities, how you interact with people during those activities, that's what would matter at the end. And when you pursue those activities, don't think about them as something I need to get myself into college. It's something that ideally you want to do because it develops you, it makes you a better human being, it makes you more happier and at peace with yourself. So it's about you, it's not about getting into college. And if you achieve that outside of academic work, then yes. I mean, if there is if yeah, and then we need to go in each specific case to give a better advice. One thing I wanted to also point it out is summers is what I'm offering seeing, and I don't think it's also the common practice for this specific group, is that people don't spend their summers pursuing any meaningful work. What do I mean by this? Because summers are to enjoy yourself, not even a question. But the problem is that admission committee is actually asking, what have you done last summer and what have you done the summer before last summer? And like at MIT, they look at 3 summers. How you spend your last 3 summers. And if there is nothing there, or for example, if there is only IO there, though when I say only IO, I don't want to diminish IO in any way. It's a very important activity. It will definitely help you tremendously to stand out, but only IO throughout the summer will not be enough of activity to be convincing. And people very, very undermine summer on their application. So I think, Milana, you had some good examples on effective use of summer.
So first of all, while I appreciate your viewpoint on, although you simplified that 40 hours per week, 40 weeks per year is something that defines one of the factors that defines a serious extracurricular activity commitment. I would say that academic programs, enrichment programs, research programs that you can do during the summer are also very important aspects because, again, for international students, especially if you get a full scholarship to participate in a summer program, is going to be a great experience because that will let the admissions officers see how you interact in an international environment. It's also, to some extent, a test on how well you'll be able to adapt in 2 or 3 weeks to the American education system. So, for example, when I took pre-college courses at a very competitive research university in the US, I also received a full scholarship. So I didn't have to pay anything, but it was a great experience because I could write a full research paper during that couple of months. And I also got to interact with international peers, both from the US and other countries. And I think this is also something that showed that I will be able to adapt to an international environment, right? So that I'm not just good in my country's educational system, right? I can also adapt to other educational systems. I can interact with my peers and so on. I think applying for different academic enrichment and research programs during the summer is a very important component for your application, take into account that you're an international student.
Absolutely. And even if you're not an international student, it's also extremely important. But for international students, it definitely adds a lot of credibility and also builds an experience. You brought up something that I wasn't planning to cover, but I think it's extremely important and a very good point. Yes, summer internships, summer research, and there are summer programs at a lot of American universities. Majority of them would not be offering a full ride or scholarship, but some do offer options for gifted kids. And something definitely to consider and apply and try to get enrolled in. This is also a very good process, kind of like a mock process of applying to US university. Like, for example, if you take a gifted program, let's say at Johns Hopkins University, right? Once you apply into the program, you will also have to write essay. You will need to submit a recommendation letter. It's also something you need to do in advance. By in advance, I don't mean you can run and apply like in April or May to study at the end of June. Most of those programs will require submission of your application between 6 to 8 months. So if you're not considering applying to the States this fall and you have one more year, look into summer programs at places that offer it for gifted students. So I think we are almost approaching not the end, but at least an end of something what we want to cover. I wanted to give you an advice of whether you will decide to go with a consulting firm like ours, or for example, you decide to go by a path that Milana picked, and she was basically building her application, and correct me if I'm wrong, based on peer help. It doesn't matter what it will be, but do get some expertise from people who already have a first-hand experience. So if you will be looking, for example, for a specific consulting company, and it's a huge industry right now in the not just in the United States, make sure that this firm doesn't have a kind of a factory approach. By a factory approach, it takes thousands of students each year, because that means their work will be very superficial. Okay, and make sure that this firm will actually have a first-hand experience with a specific, not, I mean, ideally universities, but not if universities, it will have experience at least in the country, because there are a lot of people who establish consulting companies in UK. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's just an example, and trying to apply people to United States. If there are no one on the team who had a first-hand experience with US education, or you getting advices from someone on US education who didn't have a first-hand experience with US education, this is a problem. Because US education is very, very specific. So be really careful about that. So I think I kind of covered on my side majority of things that I wanted to cover. Milana, do we have any more questions? Do we have questions from the audience? And we actually have 10 more minutes to go, I think.
Yes. So let's see if we have any questions from the audience. I don't see any yet.
Okay, I have a chat. Okay, so there is a people introducing the same. Great. I don't. Okay, so actually, yeah. This is. I think the example we have in. I don't have any general questions. I only have a specialized questions. So I think we had some other topics that we wanted to cover in our conversation, right?
Yes.
So Milana, like if there are like using those 9 minutes left, what do you think we should cover to make it most efficient?
I want to give a final advice in regards to extracurriculars and personal statement, and then we could discuss the demonstrated interest, which is a very important component when applying to colleges, component of your application. So my final advice in regards to extracurricular activities, personal statement would be show, don't tell. What I mean by this is don't tell me I'm an excellent student, I like studying, right? Show me, right? So if in your application I can see that you participated in multiple Olympiads in economics, you wrote a research paper, you participated in a summer internship related to economics, you don't necessarily need to tell me how much you like economics or how much you like studying. I can see that, right? And I think in the application process, in personal statement, in extracurricular activities, it's better to give statistics like I did 5 hours of volunteering, I won 2 international Olympiads, right? So give me information, give me facts, give me evidence, and then I, as an admissions officer, would be able to make a judgment on how I see that you're passionate about economics, or how I see that you're passionate about education. So I think this is really important. So instead of just making statements, give the admissions officers evidence, right? And then they will be able to figure out and to see the passion that you have for economics or the passion that you have for studying. So this advice, although general, is applied to personal statements and extracurricular activities. I think it is really important to realize that. Another important aspect that I would like to discuss now is demonstrated interest. So for some universities, it is especially important that before applying, you show interest in studying there. What do I mean? So a lot of universities host interviews, different workshops, also, I don't know, college campus tours, right? They want to know that you didn't just randomly apply to their university. You found out about the university 1 hour ago and you decided to send the application. They want to see that before applying, you were interested and you attended those webinars, workshops, you emailed the admissions asking specific questions about different programs that are taught at that university. I think that a lot of universities really value and track your demonstrated interest. So when considering your application, they might see, so for example, you registered with your student email to this, and that workshops, right? And they will be able to track and to see that you have done this. And for some universities, it is specifically important. And some students might get rejected just because not showing enough demonstrated interest before applying.
I think it's a very good advice. I think it will depend on the specific universities. I think your advice will be more relevant for smaller schools. For bigger universities, it will be less applicable. But I think being actually very proactive in terms of researching universities and studying and understanding why it's going back to the fit, and when if there is a fit, then you demonstrate its interest. I think it's a very good advice. I think another thing is demonstrated interest should not be for the case of getting acceptance letter, but it's because you actually research the university and you want to express this is your first choice, for example. Lana, I have a question for you. If you would name maybe 1, 2, or even 3 things that you would have done differently now applying to US university, what those would be?
I think probably first of all, starting the application process a bit earlier.
Okay.
And signing up for interviews because so I know that at a lot of universities, and let's say the UK, the interview is a mandatory component of your application. Correct me if I'm wrong. But in the US, interviews are a more optional thing. They don't, most of the universities don't require you to take interviews. So it's more like if you want to demonstrate the university that you're interested in attending, that specific educational institution, if you want to engage with alumni of that university, of the admissions officers, I think it would be a great idea signing up for interviews. In my case, I missed almost all the deadlines for signing up for the interviews, and I ended up not attending most of them. So I would probably track those things because although they're not mandatory, and just because you didn't attend an interview, they won't reject you on that basis. But I think if you do attend, and if the admissions officer will, kind of remember you, and when they will open your application, will be like, oh, I think I interviewed that person. I really like them. It's always better to see a person in real life, or at least through a Zoom meeting, than just reading papers. So I think it could play really well into your hand. The second thing that I would have done differently is probably research universities more thoroughly, right? Because I think Harvard, the Ivy League, it's really, really cool. But I think you should make a balanced list of colleges and not just apply to MIT, Harvard, and Princeton and expect acceptance letters with full ride scholarships, right? So again, each university has a mission. So it can be female conservatory where they accept only female students and they want to empower women to do great things in academia. Then there might be colleges focused on inclusivity, so they want to accept more international students, they want to diversify their student body. Other colleges, they might be more conservative, hold on to more conservative political views. Other colleges might more be specialized on business and tech, like let's say Stanford. And they might, students who kind of follow that university's mission. Let's say if we're talking about Stanford, if you have your own startup, if you're really interested in business, you know a lot about tech, you might have an upper hand. I mean, it depends. I'm oversimplifying now, but you might have an upper hand compared to other students. So I think probably research, making up a more balanced list of universities. And
Balanced list of universities.
yes,
Brilliant. Okay.
in
We
the
didn't
third,
touch on that yet, but I mean, not yet,
oh,
but yes, but I think it's a very important advice. Balanced list and being able
okay,
to have enough time to research.
yeah.
Okay. And what's the third one if you have it? Maybe two are enough. Two are enough. I think those are two very good advices. I mean, being able to do things at a slower paths, and you
Yeah,
were like really a sprinter for just a couple of months to apply to American University. That's very impressive. Congratulations on the outcome, and doing enough research on each university, especially those that don't
I like
carry that
this.
much of brand recognition, but they are as good. For example, there is a Harvey Mudd, and I'm pretty sure in California, it's a top university in the United States. It's as competitive almost as MIT in terms of it's one of the top three programs in the country on computer science, and it's actually the second highest pay in the country. And I think majority of the people here have never even heard about Harvey Mudd. A lot of people in the United States never heard about Harvey Mudd, but it's a top school. Okay. Well, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to talk to you. We really hope that you found this conversation helpful to you. We specifically for IO participants, I mean, Hermiona Education, my educational company, gives a chance for those who win our contest. We will give free spots. There will be an individual consultation with me and our director of education, Julia Barr, to go over your specific case and get our advices on the list of universities we recommend to apply, how to build your strategy. We encourage you to participate in this contest. It's actually a serious contest in terms of its content. It will be a good preparation for you. It will give you a test what an US admission process might look like. So don't, if you want to meet with us, don't apply on August 15th because you will not be able to complete it in one day. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Yelena, for coming today and for organizing this wonderful workshop. It was a pleasure to have this conversation and talk about US admissions, which is a very popular thing right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milana, for leading the discussion. And thank you very much, Io.
Yeah, thank you very much that you agreed to help our contestants